Unit conversion. There are going to be a lot of times this semester where you're going to have to convert from one unit to another, and we are going to practice a lot of different examples of that right now. This is not going to be exhaustive, but it will give you a lot of great places to start from when you're working through your first few sets of homework assignments. Now, let's start by converting 3,450 seconds into minutes. Okay, so whenever we perform a unit conversion, of course we start with the quantity that we want to convert. So we've got our 3,450 seconds, and then we multiply it by our conversion factor. You have to choose an appropriate conversion factor. Okay, so the conversion factor, you can think about it as being a fraction where the top and the bottom are equal to each other, and it's saying like an equivalency of some unit. So I want to take seconds and put them into minutes, and so I know that there are 60 seconds in 1 minute. And so my conversion factor is going to have something to do here with 60 seconds and 1 minute. Okay, and I'm going to put the 60 seconds on the bottom here, and I'm going to put the 1 minute on top. These things are equivalent. 1 minute is the same thing as 60 seconds, so it's like dividing 1 by 1. Okay, and so I put the 1 minute on top and the 60 seconds on the bottom because I want these units of seconds to cancel with each other. Okay, and so if this second is on top and this second is on the bottom, they cancel with each other. Okay, and then what I can do is finally calculate my answer. I'm left with units of just minutes right here. And so what I do is I take 3,450 multiplied by 1, and then I divide by 60 in order to go from seconds into minutes. And so if I do that, I find that my answer is 5.75 times 10 to the 1 minutes. Okay, that's the same thing as 57.5 minutes. Okay, so that's a pretty simple one going from seconds to minutes. Let's do another one. Let's do, so I'll just put an arrow here to say that's where we started from. Let's do kilometers or meters into kilometers. So you might see this happening quite a lot, especially in the physics class this semester, maybe even in astronomy too, going from kilometers to meters or meters to kilometers or various other things that have kilo in them. So we have 2.34 times 10 to the 12 meters. And we want to put that into kilometers. So we start with our number that we want to convert here, and we're going to multiply it by an appropriate conversion factor. So I know that in 1 kilometer, so remind ourselves that we're going from meters into kilometers, that in 1 kilometer, there's 1,000 meters. Kilo means 10 to the 3. There's 10 to the 3 meters in 1 kilometer. So I've got 10 to the 3 meters on the bottom and 1 kilometer on top. My meter cancels there and there. So now I take 2.34 times 10 to the 12 times 1 and divide it by 10 to the 3 in order to get my answer here, which should be 2.34 times 10 to the 9 kilometers. So these are my units here, units of kilometers. One thing that I just reminded myself of, got into my brain here, is that you want to be careful when you're putting these numbers in scientific notation into your calculator. It's really important that you understand how your calculator works. Okay, so if you have a scientific calculator, when you have 2.3 times 10 to the 9 kilometers, that's the same thing as saying 2.34 E9. Okay, this big capital E represents 10 to the exponent there. Okay, so if you have your scientific calculator, if you have the one like what I suggested in the syllabus, I've got my calculator out here, and on here I see that there's a button in the upper left corner that says second. Okay, so in order to put a number into scientific notation, let's say I want to put 2.34 times 10 to the 9 kilometers into my calculator in scientific notation. I'm going to type 2.34, and then I'm going to say second, and then there's a button just above the 7 that has x to the minus 1. Okay, so when I press the second button and press that, it gives me this E, this capital letter E here. And then if I type in 9, that gives me 2.34 times 10 to the 9 in my calculator in scientific notation. Okay, so whenever you do the second button up here, it allows you to access any of those functions that are written in the different font on top of the button there. Okay, so just keep that in mind whenever you're typing a number into your calculator in scientific notation. For example, I know I see this happen quite often, especially in the astronomy class. If you have 1 times 10 to the 9, okay, what you're going to type into your calculator is 1E9, not 10E9. Okay, that's not the same thing. So you're going to type in 1E9 in order to get your 1 times 10 to the 9. If you type in 10E9 for 1 times 10 to the 9, what you're going to get instead is 10 times 10 to the 9. And that is actually 1 times 10 to the 10. And so you want to keep yourself from doing that instead, okay? So if that doesn't make sense and you're really confused about how to use your scientific calculator and you don't understand what I just said and you don't know how to put your numbers into scientific notation, definitely that would be a great opportunity for you to get in contact with me through my student hours so we can talk about how to use your calculator, especially if you have the TI-30 XIIS like I do, okay? And you can buy these on campus in the bookstore. So now let's convert a number from meters to AU, astronomical unit. The astronomical unit is the distance between the Earth and the Sun. And I'll show you what 1 AU is equivalent to here in a minute. So we start with our number, which is going to be 2.34 times 10 to the 12 meters. So 2.34 times 10 to the 12 meters, and we want it in units of astronomical units. So 1 astronomical unit, that's our distance from the Earth to the Sun, is about 1.5 times 10 to the 11 meters, okay? So again, we have our conversion factor. We've got meters canceling on top and bottom. We take 2.34 times 10 to the 12 and divide it by 1.5 times 10 to the 11. That gives us 1.57 times 10 to the 1 astronomical unit, or 15.7 astronomical units, okay? Now, if we come over here, you don't have your calculator with you, what you could do, or you don't have a scientific calculator, you can still take 2.34, divide it by 1.5, that's your 1.57, and then because we're dividing this number times 10 to the 12 divided by this number times 10 to the 11, we subtract the exponents. So then the exponent, the times 10 to your exponent, that exponent here would be 1 because 12 minus 11 is 1, okay? Well, that's another way you can do it if you don't have your calculator. Now let's go from meters to light years. We have meters to light years. Let's say we have 6 times 10 to the 18 meters. 1 light year is the distance that light can travel in 1 year, okay? That's a really, really, really vast distance. So 1 light year is 9.5 times 10 to the 15 meters. Okay, so we see our meters cancel. We take 6 times 10 to the 18 divided by 9.5 times 10 to the 15. That gives us our 6.32 times 10 to the 2 light years. Or that's the same thing as 632 light years. So if you were doing this again without a scientific calculator, you would take 6 and divide it by 9.5, and then you'd multiply it by 10 raised to the power of 18 minus 15, okay? So 6 divided by 9.5, that's going to be a number smaller than 1. 6 divided by 9.5 is 0. Let's just go to two significant figures, 6.3, times 10 raised to the power of 18 minus 15, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, that's 3, okay? 0.63 times 10 to the power of 3. If we want to put this in normalized scientific notation, then what we want to do is we want to move our decimal spot one place to the right. When we move to the right, we put a minus on our exponent. So if we move it one spot to the right, this becomes 6.3 times 10 to the 2. Because I moved one spot to the right, this is essentially 3 minus 1. I take off 1 from the exponent because I'm moving my decimal point to the right. And then that gives me back my 6.3 times 10 to the 2 light years for that unit. Okay. Now let's do something a little bit more complicated with unit conversions. Let's take 38.9 kilometers per hour to meters per second. Okay, so now we have to use two conversion factors in order to get our answer. So we start with our value. We want to convert 38.9 kilometers per hour. And I need to multiply it by two conversion factors to get to meters per second. Well, let's take care of the time first. Let's go from hours to seconds. So we're going to multiply it by a conversion factor that tells me how many seconds there are in an hour. Or if you don't know that, we can go from how many minutes there are in an hour, then to how many seconds there are in a minute. So let's do that one. So we know that in 1 hour, there are 60 minutes, okay? And then I know that in 1 minute, there are 60 seconds. And so if I just look at those conversion factors that I wrote down here, I cancel my hour and my hour with my minute and my minute. Now I'm left with units of kilometers over seconds. So I'm almost there. I need to get to my unit. I need to get from kilometers to meters here. So I multiply by one more conversion factor. And to go from kilometers to meters, remember that kilometer or kilo is 10 to the 3. There are 10 to the 3 meters in 1 kilometer. So in 1 kilometer, there's 10 to the 3 meters. So here my kilometer on bottom cancels with this kilometer here, and now I'm left with just my units of meter on top and seconds on the bottom, which is what I was trying to go for. Okay, and so what I have to do is I have to multiply everything on the top and then divide it by everything on the bottom multiplied by each other. So this is 38.9 times 10 to the 3, that has units of meters, over 60 times 60, that has units of seconds, okay? And so then in the end, whenever I do that, I get that this is 10.8 meters per second, okay? Well, there we are. Now, if you ever forget how many seconds there are in an hour, I'll quickly show you how you can get that. So if we start with 1 hour, and we want to get to how many seconds there are in an hour, we can kind of do what we just did up here with the hours to minutes, minutes to seconds. So in 1 hour, I can multiply that by a conversion factor where I know that in 1 hour, there are 60 minutes. And I multiply that by, in 1 minute, I know that there are 60 seconds. Okay, so then I started with 1 hour, and in the end I find that 1 hour is the same thing as 60 times 60 seconds, which is 3,600 seconds. Okay, so you can always go through that conversion factor here if you forget that there's 3,600 seconds in 1 hour. You can just jump right to the seconds to hours if you know that conversion off the top of your head, or you can derive it every time by doing this right here. Okay,